Hello everybody, and thank you for joining me. This is Sierra from Sierra T Designs, and today I have the second video in my Christmas in July set. So let's get started. So I'm going to create some ATCs. I haven't made any in a little while, and that's an artist trading card in case you aren't familiar. And I'm going to create 4 of them because this piece of 5x7 watercolor cardstock creates 4 perfect ATCs. So I think that that's kind of a fun way to create a couple at a time. And I do have a stencil here from Simon Says Stamp. I think the stencil has been discontinued. I will try to find something similar if you're interested, but I always link and list all my products down below if you're ever curious about what I'm using. And I have that piece of 5x7 cardstock here, and I'm going to prep it because we are going to white heat emboss the snowflakes on the background. And I'm going to make a bit of a mistake here, but that's okay. We're going to fix it no matter what happens, so it's okay. So I did prep my cardstock, and then I'm stamping through the stencil with my Versamark ink because I want to white heat emboss these snowflakes on the background. But when I lift this up and I tilt it in the light, I can't see anything on the background. Now, I should have just assumed that they were there anyway and gone with it, but I didn't. So we're going to have a bit of a ghosty effect in the embossing. And you know what, honestly, I love how it looks, so I don't mind. And especially for this card, because the background is very whimsical and very, like, it's not a perfect background. It didn't need to be a perfect stenciling. So it works out well for this instance, but I mean, you could have flipped the cardstock over and then it wouldn't have mattered if you were upset about how this turned out. But I brought in a finger dauber so that I could be a little more specific about where the ink was going on my background. And then I just shifted it over, of course, because this is a 5x7 piece of cardstock, so it will not fit the slimline sized stencil. But I mean, again, it doesn't really matter because we're cutting these up. The only rule to an artist trading card in ATC is that it has to be 2.5 by 3.5 inches, which is why your 5x7 cardstock creates a perfect 4, right? But that's the only rule to it. So I mean, you can draw, you can paint, you can collage, you can do anything that you like, and that is the whole purpose of this. So you trade them with other artists, and I have a binder of cards that I've traded to other people that I am quite fond of. I really love them, and I take it out and look at for inspiration, and I just enjoy the cards often. I just think it's a really neat way to kind of share your art in a different way, because you send them to somebody and someone sends you one back, and it's just a really fun trade. And I've made some really cool friends doing that. So I like to make ATCs. I like to have them on hand. Every once in a while, a friend of mine asks if I want to do a trade, and of course, I'm always game to do a trade, so I like to have a few set up on hand just in case, so I always have some made. But I like to put some Christmas ones together as well, so I think this is just kind of a fun way to use your supplies in a different way, unless you make ATCs, of course, and then in which case this isn't different for you. But I'm going to heat set my white embossing powder, and I just used some Brutus Monroe Alabaster white for this. That's one of my preferred white embossing powders. I think it's one I actually reach for the most. And again, I know you can't really see anything here. It is white embossing on white cardstock, but hopefully here it'll start to be a little easier to see. So I have a piece of, this is the replacement mat for the mat that's actually on the Tim Holtz mat there. This is the replacement piece for that. And I have 4 Distress Oxide Ink colors, in Tumbled Glass, Spun Sugar, Old Paper, and Brushed Corduroy. And this is what I'm going to use to create my background. So I'm going to, as you can see, I've smooshed them all down onto my little piece there, and I've made them wet. And then I'm going to dip my cardstock into it. And I am going to dry each layer in between. I don't want the colors to blend and make mud, which is a possibility. So I do set them every time I stop working with those colors. And then I will bring in more intense versions of the colors as well, or not versions, it's the same inks, and I'll just make them more intense on the background. Like to start, I'm trying for a very light wash, and then I will pounce my cardstock back into those colors to add a little bit more. And I did dry it again here. And then here I brought in Spun Sugar because I wanted a lot more pink in the background, and I'm going to have to do this again a little bit later because I did lose some of it when I brought in the Brushed Corduroy. The other 3 colors are quite pale in comparison. Brushed Corduroy is actually a fairly vibrant color, and you're going to see what I mean right here. I should have done 1 smoosh, not 2, because this color is pretty vibrant. So you see it goes on the background and it's going to steal the show. So I add some more water on top of it and I drip some off, and I'm going to dry it a little bit differently. So here I'm going to bring in my heat tool and I'm going to start to set it. But anywhere that has a lot of color built up, I brought in a baby wipe it's wet, so it's going to, oxidize it, but they're wet anyway, so it doesn't matter. And I just kind of pounced off a little bit of the color from the background so that it's not quite as vibrant as it currently is. And that does help because they will dry back. This is a watercolor technique, really, so they do end up drying back, and we're going to fix that because we're going to bring in some more tumbled glass in a more vibrant than the beginning was. And I'm going to kind of heat set that as well. But now you can see that tumbled glass can help stand out with that brushed corduroy. Otherwise, if I had left it the way that it was here, the brushed corduroy is going to stand out the most. And I don't really want the colors in the background to be your focal. I want them to be there and I want them to be beautiful, but I don't want them to steal the show. So I really had to make sure that now that I have so much more brushed corduroy on the background that I change that up and add some of the other colors. So I did add more tumbled glass, and I am going to also add some more spun sugar here to kind of help hide and mask that brushed corduroy a bit and make it so it's not as vibrant or the most vibrant color on the background. So hopefully that kind of makes sense. And you'll see as we go along too that it's not going to be as obvious as it is here. So I did splash on some Perfect Pearls. I just have it mixed up in a little mini mister bottle. This is just because I like extra shimmer and shine in my backgrounds. So this wasn't necessary, but because it's me and I want everything to be shimmery, I did splash on a fair amount to the background. And it's, again, very subtle, but you will see it in the end when I tip the cards in the light, how pretty they look. So then I brought in the Tim Holtz Mini Paper Snowflakes die set, and I cut out, I think, almost every one of them, or very close to every one of them, and I ran that through my Gemini machine. I have a full-size Gemini. I use the Gemini Junior plates sideways. They fit perfectly. And then I cut them out of a white glitter cardstock. So glitter cardstock is always interesting, I find. So here you're going to see, I use my fingernail. If you don't have fingernails, you could, of course, use the craft pick or any other tool that is easy to poke through the paper. But I like to do this from the front because I find that it lets go better from the front than the back. Of course, it's going to be just dependent on how well it die cut, what your cardstock is doing, what kind of glitter cardstock, how thick it is. It's going to be a bit dependent on what you have, but I do find for the stuff that I use, and you know what, 2 of the snowflakes messed up because the dies shifted. I should have used mint tape and adhered them down, but I find that low tack tape does not adhere to glitter cardstock, so I didn't even attempt it. I just aligned my dies in my die plate there and pushed them through my machine to see what would come of it. And I did put a lot of dies on this cardstock. You don't need to put this many. I was just being lazy, and instead of running it through multiple times, I ran it through once. But I did end up having to sacrifice a couple of the snowflakes because of that, but I think that they still turned out really pretty, and I ended up with enough of them. So at this point, I honestly thought that I wasn't going to mat my ATCs. So I'm going to cut them down. And again, as I said, if you cut it perfectly in the centers, both directions, you will get 4 2.5 by 3.5 ATCs, which is the size of your artist trading card. So I'm going to cut them all like that. So I have my 4 ready to go. And I am going to change my mind later and decide to mat them. But at this point, I didn't. So I'm not going to trim them down anymore. I just created the 4 cards and I was happy with that. And then we're going to move on. But after, you can kind of see I've worked out my layout here, and I played around with a lot of different ideas. And when I came to what I really wanted to create, I decided that I thought a little more silver would really benefit these cards. So I brought in a piece of metallic Kraft-stock from Tim Holtz. It's the classics one. And I cut out 4 squares. And again, they're going to be that 2.5 by 3.5 inch size. And then I will have to trim down my ATCs that I currently have there because they will give you a mat, obviously, right? So we will end up having to trim those down as we go. But when I brought in the Snowflake adornment from Tim Holtz's line, I just really felt like they needed a little extra silver. So that's kind of what I decided here. So I'm going to put a dollop of the matte medium, the Collage matte medium, in the center of the snowflake because I really need the adornment to adhere to my glitter snowflake. And now you have glitter cardstock and metal, and I wasn't really sure how well this is going to work. So I put a little dollop in the center, lined it up where I wanted it, promptly threw an acrylic block at it, which made it fall out anyway, and then realigned it. And I'm going to put some acrylic blocks on top to make sure that they adhere. This might be overkill, honestly. You probably don't need this much, but I was really worried that the metal wouldn't adhere to the glitter. So this was kind of my way to kind of force it to, regardless of what it wanted to do. And then I am going to have to trim down my HE bases. So my ATC bases, or the panels. So I took off about 1/8 of an inch on each side. It's going to give you a very subtle amount of the metallic cardstock in the background, but I love how it looks, and I only wanted a thin mat behind them. So I was okay with just a very slim line. Of course, you could trim off more or less depending on what you would prefer, but that's kind of what I decided. And then I'm going to bring in my Nuvo Deluxe glue and adhere them down. I am going to use 3 different types of glue in this. This is not necessary. It's just that I have them and I like them for different reasons. So I kind of did choose to do it that way. And I did also bring those acrylic blocks back in at this point because there was a little bit of warping to my watercolor cardstock. So to make sure that it actually adheres nicely down to that Kraft-stock, I did bring in the acrylic blocks just to weigh it down once I'd lined them up nicely, and just to make sure that there was no warping and that they didn't try to pop off, because I hate that. I hate having glued pieces fall off. It's one of my biggest irritations in creating. I think you've spent all this time making this nice thing and then something falls off. That bothers me. But so I am a little heavy-handed in the glue, but that's honestly because I hate it when things lift off. So I did do all 3 there. I had one done already because I had laid it out and kind of tested my idea to see if it was going to work or not. So I had one already adhered. And then I'm going to just adhere my snowflakes down to my bases. I've lined them up how I want them, so I already knew what I was going for design-wise. And then this is where I bring in my 3rd type of glue, and this is the Barely Art glue. And I only brought this one in because it has a really fine tip on it. And I like that for thin things that I'm trying to adhere. But all of them are adhered the exact same. If they had a slightly smaller snowflake, they have 3 snowflakes. If they have a really large snowflake, they have 2. So that was kind of what I played with when I created the designs of them. And then, of course, the backgrounds are all fairly different, which I think turned out really cool. And then because I am a more is more type creator and I love having everything shiny as humanly possible, I had to add some Arctic Breeze pearls. These are also my favorite pearls. They just go with everything. I just think that they add a lot of elegance and class to stuff. So I do have a tendency to using them, but I did add those on, and I put 3 on each card, which is just, I like to do embellishments in odd numbers. So I thought they looked really pretty. So I'm going to hold them up here so you can check them out in all their glory and kind of tip them in the light so you can kind of see hopefully that perfect pearls in the background and all their shimmer and shine. I love how these turned out. I think that they turned out ridiculously pretty, and I'm really excited about them. So I'd love to know what you guys think about them. I'd love it if you leave me a comment, leave me a like, and consider subscribing if you haven't already. I do new videos every Monday and Thursday. Thank you so much, guys, and I will see you again very soon. Bye-bye for now.